Back in 2001, Finnish developer Remedy Entertainment released Max Payne, a PC action shooter heavily influenced by Hong Kong action cinema, graphic novels, and film noir, starring a New York cop on a quest for revenge. At the time, GameSpot called it one of the very finest shooters ever made, praising its incredible technical accomplishments, original play mechanics, and engaging story.
The big question with any game that's been in development for so long is, was it really worth the wait after all this time? And the good news is that the answer with Max Payne is definitely yes.
10 years later, we spoke to the game's writer, Sam Lake, now creative director at Remedy, in the developer's studio outside of Helsinki. He told us how he joined Remedy just after it shipped racing title Death Rally in 1996 to work on the project that became Max Payne.
When we were looking for the next project, we had several different ideas. And one of them was called Dark Justice, which was kind of this truck war kind of a setup, and that's how far the concept was when I came aboard to think about the story, and we made quite a few changes to the actual concept, and that's how Max Payne was started.
We also spoke to Mattias Müllerin, now managing director at Remedy, about how he came to work on Max Payne, joining the studio partway through the game's long development process.
I mean, I joined up in late 1999 when Max Payne 1 was just 6 months away, which turned out to be more like 2 years away from being done. But for about 2 months I was business development manager, where it turned out I wasn't doing much business development. I was more like actually helping to build the entire studio in terms of just the basics you need to run a successful creative organization. Death Rally was obviously a smaller project, and Max Payne being a larger project. We not only built the game itself, we built the studio in the process as well.
The budget for Max Payne was modest, just $3 million across a 4.5-year development period. The team making the game was small, with team members working in multiple roles. Famously, Lake was also the face model for the game's hard-boiled hero.
We were using people from around the office, and my relatives, most of them ended up being part of the cast. My brother and mother and father. Guy who filled our Coke machine ended up as a mobster in the game, and kind of basically using all the resources available just to make it work. And then guys were going, okay, you'll be the main character, and I was okay.
I'm the voice of the pink flamingo, so when we needed to talk words, kind of it was a Twin Peaksy vibe where I read the words phonetically backwards, and then they were turned around, and it sounds odd. I think my lines were, "Mirrors are more fun than television."
Mirrors are more fun than television.
That's mirrors are more fun than television.
It was very much a garage band, kind of the classic, startup company and studio.
A talented team, but inexperienced in many ways, but very, very enthusiastic, kind of very hungry to prove ourselves. In a way, I have to say that kind of innocence was a blessing back then, that we really didn't know what we were getting into.
I think it's a great way to come in, and I think we kind of started up at the right time where you could still do a large game with a relatively small band of people. Yeah, I think it would be very hard for a company or a studio that hasn't shipped a game of that scope to enter that realm, as we did 10 years ago.
Remedy set out to make an action game with more to its story and lead character than was customary at the time.
So in many ways, the kind of noir, hard-boiled detective, that was the starting point, and the style, how the character expresses himself with the internal monologue and things like that. He's been pushed so far into this impossible, hellish situation that everyday life sort of completely loses its meaning, and you need to look for reference points outside of that, and that kind of got me to thinking about legends and kind of gods and monsters and hell and things like that.
Max Payne drew on a wide range of influences for its action and its fiction, among them film noir, Hong Kong action cinema and Norse mythology, mixed in with a heap of pop culture references.
John Woo stuff like The Killer and Hard Boiled, obviously for the for the action mechanics, and then I'm a big fan personally of old hard-boiled film noir stuff like Bogart movies, and wanted to have that kind of a feeling there. As a kid, I was a big fan of Lord of the Rings, and that kind of got me to exploring mythology and Norse mythos in particular, which there is quite a lot in Max Payne.
I was still on the force back then. NYPD, Manhattan, Midtown North Precinct, Hell's Kitchen.
Graphic novels had a huge influence in particular on the comic book style panels the game had in place of cutscenes.
If you think about cutscenes back then, obviously, yes, they were very, very expensive, but at the time they were also kind of very limited and quite clumsy. And we knew that we wanted to tell a more ambitious story than seen in this type of game before. It's much easier to do a very, very cool and beautiful still image than kind of all of the animation. And in a graphic novel, the reader does a lot of the work and kind of invests into it and uses his own imagination to fill in the blanks. And it worked very well. We knew that we wanted to use photos as the basis, so we were kind of setting up all the panels and taking photos. Early on we did try kind of hand painting each panel based on those photos, but that turned out to be too time consuming, and it was hard to kind of make them consistent in style. So in the end we were using the photos and kind of adding filters and tweaking them, and that's how the final style came about.
The game's innovative bullet time, in which players could slow down time while shooting and diving around, drew plenty of comparisons with that of sci-fi blockbuster The Matrix, which came out a couple of years earlier in 1999.
It was a lucky break for us, because that's what brought this slow-mo combat to the mainstream, really. We did have the skyscraper and Acer Corporation and the lobby in there already, but kind of there may have been kind of minor tweaks inspired by Matrix very late in the project.
That bullet time was one of the game's considerable technical achievements, along with sophisticated in-game physics.
It's such a visual and cinematic way of kind of adding depth and adding excitement to combat.
You know, playing around with the weighting of the bullets, so obviously to make them visible in slow motion, they wouldn't actually be flying as fast as bullets. They'd be flying at something like 80 miles an hour or something, but they'd have the weight of 2 bowling balls to get the right kind of ragdolls, and we'd be tweaking those parameters, and it was a ton of fun.
Give the control of this mechanic to the player, so the player can kind of press a button and go into slow-mo, and that was kind of the moment when we knew that, okay, this is how it should work.
Max Payne was received warmly by gamers and reviewers alike, today averaging an 89% over on Metacritic, a relief for a game that had been so anticipated and so talked up in previews.
Demoing the game, the queues were just getting longer and longer. Everyone wanted to get in and see the demo, and we were getting a lot of really rave previews on the game. So it was kind of, okay, we must be doing something right.
The public figures that both games combined have sold in excess of 7.5 million units, so very respectable for its day. I'd be lying if I wouldn't say that I don't remember some of the criticism. You know, a lot of the reviews were obviously very, very positive, and then the one or two who were highly critical of what we'd done. Max Payne lacks the architectural grandeur of Oni, or something like that, which for our level team and our environment team, who I think had done a wonderful job. Nothing to take away from Oni, but it's still kind of, well,
Bolstered by the success of the first game, Remedy moved directly onto Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, this time with a bigger budget, a slightly bigger team, and a shorter development period. The second game came out just 2 years later, in 2003. Millerin tells us what the extra cash brought to the development process.
Motion capture actors, you could get stunt doubles, and things like this that that show kind of underneath. You can't maybe put your finger on it, but you can tell that something's upped on the quality. Obviously, the graphics improved and so forth. I'm really happy about being able to, what we did with physics on Max Payne 2. I think it was about an 18-month development cycle at the end of the day, and being able to just do that jump forward, which was quite cutting edge at its time.
Though the gravelly voice of the franchise protagonist stayed the same, that of actor James McCaffrey, Remedy could now afford to shell out for a Max Payne face model and brought actor Timothy Gibbs on board, letting Lake focus on the writing.
My job as the writer was growing bigger, and the schedule for the sequel was a lot tighter. And getting a bigger budget and getting professionals to do all the areas, different areas, getting kind of professional actors to do the different roles, it felt like a very good move.
As with the first Max Payne, the setting for Max Payne 2 was a bleak and gritty imagining of New York City, to which the Remedy art team went on a research expedition early on.
A group of our graphics artists went and kind of these young lads with very, very expensive cameras, and Rockstar people were kind enough to provide them with ex-NYPD armed bodyguards who took them on a tour to all the worst neighborhoods imaginable.
Now they only remained in the worst neighborhood, the monster's grave.
Apart from the airport, I had never visited New York. I only went for the first time after the games were done. So kind of for the story, I was more like creating a noir York City, kind of inspired by pop culture.
I hadn't had the opportunity to go to New York before Max Payne 1 or Max Payne 2. I think for me as well, I wanted to go there once Max Payne 1 had been done, but only made it around during Max Payne 2. Just to see kind of what it really was. And obviously Sam's interpretation of what New York is a twisted mirror on reality, but it was very interesting.
While the first game had been a noir-flavoured tale of revenge, in the second game, Lake expanded the role of hitwoman Mona Sachs to tell a noir love story.
Love is what gets everything going in Max Payne 1, and kind of it's logical from there to think about Max Payne 2 and figuring out that he needs a new reason to go on, and it should be a new love. So he needs to find someone he cares about that kind of puts him back into action.
The first game had been ambiguous on whether Mona Sachs even survived, though initially she had been killed off much more decisively.
In an early draft, Mona was one of them who got killed very clearly and conclusively on screen. And it was our graphic novel artist, Kia Kallio, back then, who felt kind of so sad about the fact that Mona would be killed that I decided to change it so that the elevator doors close and her body disappears, so there is an open possibility that she survived. And well, it's thanks to that decision that Mona ends up in such a big role in Max Payne 2.
I started getting hate mail because we'd killed Mona Sachs. And you've hit a certain kind of level, and you've touched people on a deeper level when you're getting, well, not death threats, but something short of that in terms of hate mail.
As dark as the games got, though, with some memorably harrowing nightmare sequences, they maintained a self-aware, satirical sense of humour.
You have to be able to laugh at yourself, because there is a lot of melodrama, and we know that it's there. So kind of also kind of having fun with it. Comedy and humor, even in a very dark and serious game, or maybe even more so, it's a natural part of a game, because whenever you give controls to someone, funny things happen. And I think that more than anything, game stories should reflect the action, and so there should be funny stuff in there as well.
Get out! Get out! No one
since driving me out of my home.
The Max Payne sequel impressed critics again, picking up an 86% Metacritic average as a result. It didn't quite attract sales numbers to match. The following year, the chief exec at Take-Two, parent company of Rockstar, which published Max Payne 2, said the game did fairly poorly compared to our expectations. Still, GameSpot called it a remarkable production with an outstanding story, and a third Max Payne was confirmed for release in a few years. A few years later on, it was still quiet on the Max Payne front, but for an abysmal movie adaptation in 2008. And then in 2009, the announcement came. Max Payne 3 was on the way, with development duties given to game makers at Rockstar, rather than Remedy, which was working on survival horror Alan Wake at the time. With the third game now due for launch in March 2012, Rockstar has been inviting Remedy to weigh in on the game in progress.
We've been friends with Rockstar for a very long time. Personally, and then obviously as companies, we've collaborated on Max Payne 1 and Max Payne 2, and you know, when they went about building Max Payne 3 and they started, you know, they opened up the conversation. They were kind enough to give us builds and then asking for feedback, and in that way I think it's felt natural.
It's been worth the wait, and in many ways, I mean, we spend a lot of years working very closely on Max, and now kind of getting near to release, it feels like kind of welcoming an old friend.
This was a hell of a hangover.
And then there'll be certain elements that are obviously familiar to Max Payne fans, but I think it's more of a wait and see, and you know, enjoy the trailers and hopefully enjoy the game.
It wasn't pretty, but I guess none of what was about to happen was gonna be.